Okay, we're back. We're here at Legends Studio in Los Angeles, California. And I'm sitting here with the Studio One Producers Focus Group. These are some talented individuals who've had an opportunity to play around with version 3. We're very lucky. You know, we've covered using Studio One as a creative sound design tool. We've covered talking about it as a songwriter's tool, but there are so many. They put so much work. There's so many new features in version 3. I'd really love to hear from each of you and make this a bit more freeform about some of the smaller things that you like, the little details that were put into the application that you feel really make it something special, because that's where the product really shines. If you don't have to limit it to version 3. I'd love to hear about new version 3 features, but you know there are a lot of people tuning in who they're new to Studio One altogether. So I'd love to know what you would say to a friend that you wanted them to try Studio One. What do they need to know?
I want to start with my top 3 would be Scratch Pad, the multi-effects, Resizable Faders.
Okay, what's that?
With the Resizable Faders, it's like, you know, when you're in a DAW and you have a fader and you're trying to move in small increments, you know, on a board, when you're touching it, it has a very tactile feel and you can go really slow. But when you're on a computer with a mouse and a keyboard and it has this much space, you're kind of limited, you know, it will jump. But when you resize a fader, it increases the increments in which you can move the fader up and down. So being able to resize a fader gives you that little minute detail. It's kind of like a fine brush or pen. You know, being able to stretch it out across the screen and say, okay, I just want to move it this much, as opposed to going from like line to line.
So what you're saying is it really increases the granularity of your fader, and that thereby gives you more control over your mix.
I like those big words.
Yeah. Well, I work in marketing. It's my job to sum that up a little bit.
I like it, though.
Yeah. Thank you.
So that and note repeat.
The repeater?
Oh, yeah. Not the note. And that's one of like the hidden features. Like if you do Control, I think it's Shift Control R, it brings up like a little bar above the track bar, and it has note repeat and note erase, which is like a very MPC thing. And a lot of people didn't know about that. You know, I'd asked about it in a lot of different DAWs, and I think recently Logic put it in there, but the first people that I ever saw that had this feature was Studio One, and a lot of people didn't know it was there.
Okay, so you just described what a feature is, but what would be a practical use for that kind of feature?
I mean, like I said, you know, back in the day, coming from an MPC background, one of the top features that any producer would use would be note repeat. So like, you know, when you're making kick patterns, just being able to do a steady 16th note and then jump to a 32nd note. And then if you made a mistake, we would also do note erase, where you just punch in and out and it would take that note in and out. And that created so many different things, but especially now in like EDM, when you hear like going from a 4th to 8th to 16th to 32nd.
Yeah, the increased steps.
You can increase the steps. You hear that all the time, and that's something that, you know, you can really only do other than drawing it in on the grid, you know, and switching the grid and painting it across. That was the old way of doing it. Now you can just like click across and get those rolls.
So how about you, Jay?
Well, one of the features that I usually use to coerce people to at least give Studio One a try is the transform to audio feature. So you have like a MIDI clip, and you know, in every other DAW, you either have a very cumbersome process of setting the locators, exporting the audio outside, and then re-importing it so you have an audio file of that MIDI clip. In Studio One, you have, you know, many ways of doing this, but perhaps the most impressive one is to just bounce the whole track, transforming it into an audio track, but it still retains the MIDI information. So if at any time you want to go back and edit it, basically it's like a really advanced freeze, but then you can slice and dice that MIDI track that is now an audio, but still has the little MIDI information there. And then when you go back to the MIDI has also been edited the same way. So, you know, for EDM people where everything is MIDI and it's all virtual soft synths, it's very important, you know, to have something like that. Mostly because of CPU usage, people are using a lot of laptops nowadays, so they don't necessarily have like a really big, powerful computer. But also in terms of editing, I think it's really next level. And also the color interface color changes.
Oh, you're talking about how you're
on version 3.
Yes.
The ability to make it as light or dark or blue or pink as you want.
Yours is of course pink.
Yes, with little dashes of green and butterflies. Yeah, that's how I roll. That's how I roll.
Well, also the other cool thing about when you transform MIDI to audio is that it deactivates the instance of the instrument, but it doesn't get rid of it.
Right. No, it's
so you can choose to get rid of it or not. In other words, if you want to use that instrument again with all the all the parameters that you've adjusted to play something else, you can just pull up a new instrument track and select it and
route it exactly.
And it's pretty great. So but then you have the option to get rid of it too if you want. So.
Yeah. What are some other things that you like?
For me, it's mostly a macro thing. You know, like I'm a producer just as much as I'm an engineer, just as much as I'm a songwriter. And with Studio One, I'm able to use all of those equally. And it's beautiful. Like, it's so creative, and it's also technical, but in this really fun way where it's like, I'm like, oh, I wonder how to do this. Oh, right, figured it out in 2 seconds, you know? And I literally am not limited at all in any way, as a songwriter, as a producer, or as an engineer. And it's made me a better mix engineer. It's made me a better everything.
Yeah, you know,
more efficient, everything.
One of our engineers said this to me. He said, you know, we're all musicians here, and the process of creating music is fun, and it should flow. Yeah. And why should that stop when it comes time to edit and mix? Yeah. Because, you know, like mix engineers think of mixing as another instrument. Right. So you should feel like you're playing when you're making music, and that's really what we're trying to accomplish. I think you just summed that up real nicely. Yeah, Faust, how about you?
Well, one of the things I'm playing with now, I'm still getting familiar with it, are the music loops, where actually one of the guys from Personas turned me on to it, where I could take a piece of music that I wrote and MIDI and convert it to a music loop and be able to use that either as a one-shot loop or bring it in as a MIDI or actually edit and automate all the different parts of it as well once I bring it back in as MIDI. So it makes it a lot easier to create content because I can just take like the song, for instance, and break it up into pieces, save each piece as an individual loop or a hit, whether it be, you know, of 8 bars or 16 bars. You're creating your own samples. But they're all MIDI and they're audio. You can bring it back in and you can use them however you want. I think that's pretty amazing.
Awesome. Shan, what do you got?
Man, scratch pad is, I mean, to me, we could have stopped there. I mean, just this idea of never having to stop creating. Just because I'm creating a song doesn't mean that the process of creativity stops, you know? So in the middle of creating, you know, an idea comes from nowhere because you're inspired, right? That's what essentially, you know, we're just creating from things that inspire you. And so while in the middle of creating something, I'm inspired to do something else, and I literally can just like jot it down. It's like you know, a memo pad, you know what I'm saying? And it just that's it. Like the scratch pad is gonna change people's flow because you're always creating. You don't have to stop. You don't ever have to hit stop.
Right.
You know.
Awesome. So I'd love to hear about any particular success stories you might have had with Studio One. You know, has it ever saved the day? You know, have you ever like really had that aha moment while using it, and that led to some big inspirational break? Or
I remember, I think it was 2 years ago when we were working on. I was in Paris working on the Yeezus album, and like. Kanye was trying to get the drums to sound a particular way, and you know everybody has their like DAWs, and everybody has it in front of them. And I was like, oh, and I just went through my browser, dragged some drum samples, pitched it up right there, and you know it happened at that moment, and it was there to audition and listen to immediately. You know, and that was just on version 2.
Right.
You know, so like. If I had version 3, I would have had like 10 ideas within 5 minutes. But again, you're just able to create in the moment. You know, hey, let's just, you know, filter out, you know, the low end on just this part, but leave everything else. Because sometimes that's what happens. You just want to affect one part. You don't want to have to bust it to this channel or XYZ. Just want this one part. Drag the effect, clip event
effects,
and boom.
Yeah, and see, but now in 3, you can just affect not only just the rolling off of that one filter, but then affect different portions within the bandwidth with the multi-effects, and that's going to change the game too, because now you can take a sample and not only like maybe roll off the low end so that you're getting that vocal, but then affect a specific frequency with a different effect on it and still keeping everything below that frequency the same as well. That's a game changer, yeah.
Affecting the effect, yeah.
On the effect, yeah.
I think it's kind of taken mixing in general and applying it to the music creating process in a way that's fun and creative and where you don't have to be like a scientist, a mix engineer to be able to actually play with it and kind of add space to your sounds and figure out ways to make your sounds really stand out in the mix.
Yeah, I mean, you also can mix as you go. I mean, I know a lot of people do that, but I never used to do that. When I started using Studio One, I started mixing as I was going, and then by the end, I was like, oh my God, I'm done. This is crazy, you know?
It's all become like one step. Yeah, like before it's like, okay, I've created, now I have to get it mixed. But if I'm
it used to take so long.
EQing and editing and doing all of these things as I go, you know, when I have to, you know, export my stems, which is, to me, which is amazing because you just hit export stems and everything is
it's the
just
quickest thing of all time.
Yeah. So now I don't have to worry about, you know, the mix engineer like.
And it automatically zeros your stems too. Yeah. You don't have to. Sorry.
I don't have to worry about like a mix engineer adding like not enough reverb or, you know, just destroying what I had initially. I like for, you know, my mixer to be able to just focus on mixing and not have to worry about, you know, man, I hope I was able to translate his ideas. Well, I'm handing him the idea.
Yeah, you're handing him stuff in a largely formed state.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And so then he can just do, he does what he does best.
Exactly.
Refine it.
Exactly. So.
Right. So we're just about out of time. You know, there are a lot of people that are going to start using Studio One after this, and I'd like to know if you have any advice for them, where to start, or you know, how to get going on Studio One. You know, because you all came to it at some point, you know, fresh.
Well, what I did, I mean, I pulled up a demo, and I saw everything, how everything was done, and then I figured it out. I mean, to me, it's just like, you know, figuring out how it looks in real time, like already applied. You know what I mean? Right. And then that really made it easy for me to integrate it into what I was doing.
Yeah, did you feel like it made sense?
Yeah,
like when you got
it did. Yeah, absolutely. You know.
I think it's a pretty easy program to jump into. You know, you have multiple ways to access everything that you want. And I mean, I've used a bunch of different DAWs, and I've never been able to wrap my head around one faster. And that's not saying that it's easier to use, it's just more intuitive. Right. It's just friendlier program to use. But also on the website alone, there's a million videos also. Like, so anything you can't figure out, I mean, there's a wealth of knowledge already on the Persona site that you can get access to.
Yeah. I mean, I said this earlier, but, you know, if you're familiar with a computer, then you're familiar with Studio One. That's pretty much the only way, the best way I could explain it is if you know how to use your computer, you know how to use Studio One. Where with other DAWs, you have to know something about engineering or how a DAW works. You know, with Studio One, it's like, I know my computer, I know how to create music.
Right.
No classes needed.
No classes needed.
just download it, you know, open it up, and just create.
Right.
Just drag and drop everything.
Yeah.
And
drag and drop
things
everything.
will work out.
Yeah, everything works.
Eventually you'll have a song.
Right.
Yeah.
just hit record and start going, pretty much.
Well, there you have it. Drag and drop everything.
And you'll have a song.
And you'll have a song.
Guaranteed.
With no class.
With no class.
Yeah. All right, well, I want to thank you all for coming down. Let's just quickly go down the aisle here. If people want to connect with you online, could you give us an idea where they can find you?
Have a website, Sak Pase, SAKPASE .me.
KATFYR.com.
KATFYR.com.
KATFYR.com or Facebook.
Okay.
Yeah. At Chak Celeb1, pretty much everywhere. At CHAKCELEB and the number 1.
Okay.
I would say urbanassaultmusic.com. Everything's on there, all the social media, everything. That's the fastest, easiest way to get a hold of us.
Awesome.
Byaginc.com, BYAGINC.com.
All right, thanks. Well, appreciate you spending time with us. That's what we got here from LA.